Hello everyone, welcome into Fatty's Feast, where we make the best food you'll ever eat without leaving your backyard. My name is Josh, and today we are traveling back in time to react to my first ever brisket cook video. This is gonna suck, especially for me, so let's get started. So not only was this my first ever brisket cook video, but this was my first ever barbecue video, smoking anything on my smoker ever video ever. So needless to say, I had no clue what I was doing. And unless you've been around since the beginning of this channel, which I really appreciate, you probably have never seen this video, probably for the better. At the time this video was released, we only had about 69-ish subs, give or take. The channel was called Tubby Time. We were doing all sorts of different cooking videos. And this really started my barbecue journey and made Fatty's Feasts what it is today. Now you might be asking, why did I release this video if I had no freaking clue what I was doing? The reason was I wanted to show people that were first getting into barbecue, or maybe were nervous to get into barbecue, or didn't want to screw something up, that it's okay to screw up. And even though I made that very clear in this video, I still had a bunch of people commenting saying, well, my first brisket was better than what Aaron Franklin's ever made. You suck. And that's all fine and dandy. I don't lie to make myself feel better. So that being said, now that I've progressed substantially in my barbecue journey, I wanted to bring this video back into the spotlight so we can review the mistakes I made so you don't make them yourself. And before we start, I just want to say, once again, I am no expert. Half the time I have no freaking clue what I'm doing with anything in life. I'm just your neighborhood guy that loves drinking beers on a weekend and showing you how to make the best food you'll ever eat without leaving your backyard. And I really take that mission to heart, because you can make delicious barbecue, delicious food on the griddle. You can make all sorts of things at home with minimal effort. Yeah, 16 hours is a long time to cook a brisket, but you can make this high quality barbecue without going out and spending $150 at a restaurant somewhere. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I love trying barbecue, obviously. That's where I get my ideas, but you can do this yourself. And I think for a lot of beginners out there, this video will help you substantially. And for all of you seasoned pitmasters out there, you're gonna wanna stick around, because we can laugh at me together and drown in my sorrows, and I can be the center of your jokes. But like I said, even though this channel's come a long way, we've all started somewhere, and I'm no exception to that. So I wanna show you guys what I was in the beginning. Now, how this is going to work is I'm not going to react to this video in real time, because this video is 37 minutes long in its original form. So I cut it into bits and pieces where I want to touch on specific things I did or said that went well or went poorly, mostly poorly, to be honest. However, if you are that bored and so inclined that you want to check out the original video, I'm going to regret this. I'm going to put a link right here. Please just don't. But enough of me yapping. I have my whiskey because it's Whiskey Wednesday, and I'm going to need it to get through this. So cheers, let's do this thing. Isn't this thing beautiful? It's so cool. Got this the other day for a steal, $4.99 a pound for our area. That's really good, but it's a prime brisket. It is actually 20.71 pounds. I don't know why I bought this. I was too lazy to go to Costco and get like a normal size brisket, so I went down the street to the butcher, and this is what they gave me. So we are going to try to not screw this up and waste $100. Okay, first obvious thing I want to point out. If you have never smoked anything before, do not make a brisket your first thing to ever smoke. Literally the only time I ever lit a fire in my smoker was for seasoning and doing a practice burn. Actually, I don't even think I did a real practice burn. So I literally had no clue how the smoker worked, but this was stupid of me. I knew it right from the beginning. I should not have done this. If it is your first time smoking something, I do recommend a pork butt, pork shoulder. It's very forgiving. You can over season it, you can over smoke it and still get a very good product. And you can run uneven temperatures for the most part and not screw it up. It's pretty damn forgiving. And it's cheap. So don't do a brisket until you really know how your smoker functions, especially with meat in there and you're used to it. After that, go for the brisket, but it's too complicated of a piece of meat to do for your first ever smoke. As you can see, I have my half-ass cutting boards here with towels, because it's probably going to be a mess. Yeah, what is this? Okay, I'm very cheap. I've said that in so many of my videos, but guys, oh my God, I can't believe I did this. I have two really shitty disposable plastic cutting boards that are not connected, by the way, that have paper towels underneath to prevent the juice from coming out or whatever. And then I don't know what that knife is. Get yourself a nice wooden cutting board. My buddy Pete makes amazing cutting boards. At least for me, it's a side business of his, but I'll have links in the description for cutting boards on Amazon, or just go out and get something that's like 24 by 18, something along those lines, that you can put a thick ass boy on and cut it up correctly. Also, before we get into the prep, I'm gonna put a link here for my brisket prep video. It's all about the seasoning, how I prep my briskets, how I trim them, all that good stuff. If you want more details on that, check this video out. So I'm gonna glove my left hand so I can use the knife in my right. Okay, the first positive thing I did here, clean hand, dirty hand. So I always use my non-dominant hand as my dirty hand. I glove it up, I can take the brisket out and not get all the area around me by touching things contaminated. And then I use my dominant hand, which is right-handed for me, to slice and trim my brisket up. I shouldn't say slice, trim my brisket, prep it, all that good stuff. If you didn't just see what I did, yeah, I pulled this out of the freezer, and the reason was I had Kayla put this in the freezer an hour before I got home from work, so it'd be cool as possible. You know, a cool piece of meat is always better than working with a warm piece of meat. And especially when we're gonna be using this knife, we don't want the fat or anything to slip through. Okay, another thing I did well here, and I still do today, freeze your brisket before trimming it. I got so much shit for this because people are like, you shouldn't freeze your briskets. This video was filmed in July. It was like 90 something degrees in my house. I freeze the brisket for an hour, so it just makes trimming the fat on top way easier. You start working with that fat that'll soften up very quickly, you're in for a very risky and wild ride. It could slip, you could cut your finger, and the last thing you want to do is end up in the hospital when you want to smoke a brisket, because you're in that smoking mode. But the other thing I did here that I'm not a huge fan of is I cut the package open with the fat side down. So I was going along the meat. Now I've seen mixed feelings on this. I always cut my package open with, I said package. I always cut my package open with the fat side up because I can accidentally nick the fat, and most likely I'm trimming that fat off because I'm trying to get it down to a 1/4 inch. If I do it on the meat side and I stab that meat, or my knife slips or whatever, it's not gonna, ruin the brisket, but it's not gonna look good and it might affect the cooking. I don't really know. It's probably not a big deal, but I always just go on the fat because there's more protection. The fatter, the better. Most girls don't agree with me on that, but I believe it. So we are just about at the level I wanna be at, I think. I lied. I said we were gonna take off about 2 pounds. That's a few more than 2 pounds. I'm sweating my ass off. It's hot in this house, but it's okay. One thing I want to bring your attention to, one thing I took off, is this whole piece right here. And the reason is it was sitting here, and it's pretty thin. If I were to cut the fat off that, which is right there, I mean, it's basically like a fat layer, and wasn't going to render very well. But I think we're good. There are some areas that are a bit thicker, and especially over on this side, this has become a complete mess. I don't know what to do with this over here. I don't know if that's going to render out, but I do want to leave an extra fat layer on there just because it is where the heat's going to be going. Didn't do too much. There was some silver skin on the back. Didn't do too much with that. Yeah, I'm starting to hit the actual meat. Okay, there's a lot to digest here, and I will tell you this brisket was not trimmed anywhere to where I would do it today. First off, let's talk about your knife. I use a very cheap boning knife by Mercer. I'll put a link in the description once again. Don't use a chef's knife. Use something you can really dig into the brisket with if you want to carve some fat out. This thing is flexible, it's very sharp, and if I drop it, okay, if I drop it or damage it, don't do that, I can just throw it away. Now I have seen people use actual long carving knives for their brisket prep. That's great for doing the flat, where you have an area you want to be uniform all the way down. It saves a little bit of time, but for getting in those hard to reach places, you definitely want something a little bit smaller. So you can use that for some instances. I just stick with one knife for my entire prep. So the most obvious thing I didn't do here is I didn't do my initial cuts down the side of the brisket. The sides of the brisket are normally cauterized. I think that's the technical term, if you will, for prepping. So I take that off because A, you don't want to eat that. It just looks unappetizing and disgusting. B, it's not going to absorb any smoke flavor. But more importantly, you can see what you're going to be cutting when you go down the top of the brisket. That will really expose the marbling of the brisket. It'll expose the fat layer on top so you can really see what you're working with. It's a lot of meat to take off because you want to go in at least a 1/4 inch. I'd go usually a 1/2 inch right down the side. But one thing I did do is I took that area of the flat off that's very thin. My rule of thumb is I want a thumb, it's funny, right? I want a thumb height, I guess you would say, of actual meat, okay? So not including the fat. If it's the size of my thumb, I know I have enough meat there where it's not gonna burn in the smoker. If you don't take that off, it's just gonna burn. It's going to be wasted meat. You don't want that. One thing I didn't do a good job of with that though was rounding the brisket off. So I do make a cut on the other side where the flat is thick. I don't typically go really far in. I know some people will like make it an equal cut all the way around. They'll take a shit ton of meat off the brisket. I don't like doing that, but I do round it off. You don't want any jagged edges because that's just gonna burn. You want the brisket to be uniform and you want that smoke to travel over it. You want it to look beautiful, nice and ovally, if you will. I mentioned leaving more fat on the point. Yeah, obviously you wanna do that. If I had made my cuts down the side of the brisket, I would have been able to better see what I was working with when it came to the point right at the rear of the brisket. Probably in that case, looking at that, I think I mentioned that there was a thing where it was hanging. I would have just cut that off. I don't care. I don't want that. Once again, we can reuse that meat for something else. And then the last thing I mentioned was silver skin. I don't go crazy with silver skin. I know a lot of people preach to like take off all the silver skin. I don't taste it. I don't care. I don't think it really makes a big difference either way. 4 pounds, 6.9 ounces. Nice. Yeah, so we took off quite a bit. So going by those numbers, I would say what we're looking for is about a 16-hour cook time. So that brings us, if we start this bad boy around 3 o'clock, which it might be a little later than that, I'll start it, maybe around 4. That gets us to, yeah, like 7 p.m., 8 p.m. today. Okay, so let me explain what I was thinking here. So the general rule of thumb with briskets when it comes to time to cook, if you're cooking at like higher temperatures, like starting at 250, you want to account for about an hour for every pound pre-trimmed. So I had a 20-pound brisket. I should have just said, okay, it's going to take me 20 hours. But what I did was I took all that fat off and I weighed it out and I said, okay, well, I took 4 pounds of fat off, 4.69, nice. So now it's only gonna take me 16 hours. Now every piece of meat is different. I've had 12-pound briskets take me 16 hours. I've had 16-pound briskets take me 12 hours. It really depends on the cut of meat. They're all weird and there's no rhyme or reason for it. So just to be safe, just account for, if it's a 16-pound brisket, it's gonna take you 16 hours. Now in this particular case, and this is something I don't do anymore at all, I was making this brisket early in the morning to serve for dinner that night. I always say, make your brisket the day before, let it rest overnight, and then serve it the next day. So that might mean I throw a brisket on at 3 in the afternoon and it's done at 6 a.m. and then I'm gonna serve it for dinner that night. I'll let it take a 15-hour rest or so. But I've run into too many circumstances, especially with my friends that like barbecue, where they're trying to get this brisket done when they wanna serve it for dinner and they're just taking it off and it doesn't have enough time to rest. Just to be safe, I'd rather let it rest for between 9 and 16 or 14 hours usually is my max, 15 hours, than rush to get it done and have it ready for dinner and have all this other crap go wrong. There's that fat section underneath there, and I didn't know what to do with that. I know now, cut it out. This is why I'm saying a knife like this comes into handy very well for this particular circumstance. You can get right in there and carve that fat out. That fat is very hard. It's part of the decal. It's that fat band between the point and the flat. It's disgusting. There's no good fat on there. It's not going to render down at all. So you just want to cut it out. It's not going to make a good product in the end if you leave it, because you're just going to have really fatty, not good fat, not good, delicious, melt in your mouth fat pieces of brisket. And I've seen people say, no, you need to leave that in because it's going to prevent the brisket from imploding on itself, and bullshit, okay? I've never had a brisket implode on itself. I've been doing that for years where I just cut that whole thing out as best I can. It's going to be fine. If you're worried about it imploding on itself, you can stick a small split of wood under there to prop it up. But trust me, you're gonna be fine. You don't want that in your finished product. Just take it out. So I'm doing a very simple rub, kosher salt, and coarse ground black pepper. All right, so just going across The shaker sucks. Trying to be as even as possible. Trying to make sure I'm getting all sides here. Pepper time. I'm going to go a little bit heavy here. Okay, so still, I believe you can't go wrong with salt and pepper, but there are a few things I want to talk about here. Now, first of all, I do use a different brisket rub now. It's basically the same thing with a little bit of a twist. So you have 8 parts coarse ground black pepper, you have 3 parts kosher salt, 3 parts Lowry seasoned salt, and 1 part garlic powder. And I still use these amazing Costco shakers, but I use actually the black peppercorn shaker because it has this opening up top and I can really get in there and mix the bottle around as I season my brisket. But first, let's talk about the size of your seasoning, if you will. It's very important you use larger seasonings. So I had a comment recently on one of my videos that said, well, what if you like ground your seasoning up for a better mixture? I understand where this is coming from. However, you want coarser ground black pepper, at least 16 mesh. You want coarser ground kosher salt, not like huge pieces, obviously, but pretty big pieces, way bigger than table salt. The reason being is when the smoke travels over your brisket, you want those bigger pieces of seasoning to catch that smoke and let it adhere to the meat. That's what's gonna make your great bark and that great flavor when you bite into it. You've ever had a piece of brisket that that pepper flavor just explodes in your mouth? That's because of the coarser ground seasoning. So if you mix it, a lot of it gets washed out and it just makes a very boring bleh bark. Next, I've seen some barbecue experts say you need to mix your seasonings together and others say you need to keep them separate. I'm indifferent because at the end of the day, if you're just doing salt and pepper, like I'm doing a lot of things here, so I mix it, but if you're just doing salt and pepper, you can keep them separate because then you can control how much salt versus how much pepper you want. And when you mix those seasonings together, you sort of have to have this hand motion where you're mixing the seasonings in the bottle as you're going across the brisket because you want to incorporate everything, okay? So sort of something like this, right? The reason being the pepper, I can't remember. The stuff's gonna sink and move, so you're gonna have like some pieces that are saltier, you're gonna have some pieces that are more pepper. If I'm just doing salt and pepper, I'll just keep it separate most of the time. And that way I can really control how much salt I am putting on my brisket. Either way, you want an even coating so you're getting equal amounts salt, equal amounts pepper, equal amounts whatever in every bite of your brisket. Next, let's talk about binders. I didn't use one here, but typically I do just to let that seasoning stick a little bit. Now, you can use all sorts of binders. You can use mustard, hot sauce, pickle juice, water, whatever you want. But one trick is if you don't mix your seasonings together and you salt it first, you can actually salt it, let it sit for about 10 minutes. That's gonna release some moisture from the brisket itself, and that will allow your pepper to stick. So if you're really against using binders, salt it first and then put whatever else on that you're going to put on. And the last thing I want to touch on here is I started seasoning fat side up. I always start fat side bottom, and this sounds lame, but you want a nice presentation on your brisket. So especially if you're new, if you haven't seasoned a brisket before, you want it uniform. You don't want to do what I did where I was like going down the edge and then this edge and then here. You want to sort of go across evenly down the whole thing. So if you're going to screw it up, which you probably will, because we all do, right? You want to start on your non-presentation side. That's going to be the side that's on the smoker, that's taking the heat for the most part. When you unwrap that, you want that nice presentation. All right, here we are finally. It's been about an hour. This has been sitting, as you see, it's firm, or it's loosened up a lot. Lift this up. Oops. And we are going to cook this. I'm going to do fat side up, I believe. And we're going to close this down. We're going to try to maintain about as you see, I lost some degrees there. We're trying to maintain about 250-ish or so. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a water pan in this little serving tray thing right over the firebox, or right in the firebox, I should say. And that'll ensure that the moisture is getting to the brisket and not drying it out. And now we wait. I'm going to give it about 3 hours, just maintain our fire, keep the lid closed. Once again, we're maintaining about 250, or trying to. And then we will go from there and see where we're at. I look so shot there. Can I just say that? Okay, so first off, if you want to get more information about how I cook my briskets initially when I put them on the smoker, brisket part 2 right here, you can check that out for more details. Now the first thing, I let my brisket come up to room temperature, like not fully room temperature, but I let it warm up a little bit, let those seasonings sort of mend into the brisket before I put it on the smoker. You don't want to put a cold piece of meat on a hot smoker. Now during the summertime, that's very easy to accomplish, but you can just let that sit out on your counter for about an hour while you get your fire going. That being said, do not do that with pork, do not do that with chicken, do not do that with seafood. Basically just do that with red meat, okay? Just like you get your steaks up to a room temperature before you sear them, do your briskets that way as well. The next thing is when you start your fire versus when you start prepping your brisket. I typically light my charcoal chimney and then I go inside, start prepping my brisket, throw the charcoal in, build my log cabin up. You can check out my fire management video for more information on that. I let that burn down to coals because it's gonna run a little bit hotter as you get that nice coal bed formed. And by that time, the briskets come up to room temperature, everything's good, I'm ready to throw it on. And don't be afraid to throw your brisket on at a lower temperature. If you're running at about 200 when you throw your brisket on, that's great because then you can just build up that temp. And really you want to start your briskets at a lower temperature to build up a nice smoke flavor. That's really what the first 3 hours of a brisket cook are all about, is getting that great smoke flavor. Now you may notice I struggled with, am I putting this fat side up or fat side down? If your smoker is pushing heat up from the bottom, so let's say you have a kettle, you want to put your brisket fat side down. That sort of sucks because I like having the fat as a nice presentation piece at the end, but it's going to protect your brisket from burning. You know, the meat is going to have a tendency to crisp up and burn. You don't want that. But for most offset smokers, especially the Brazos, if you take out the baffle plate, you can put it fat side up. It's really all about where your heat is coming from. So if it's from the bottom, put it fat side down. If it's from the top or it's going around or it's coming through, put it fat side up. One thing to mention though is a lot of people say, well, you want to put it fat side up because it's going to baste the meat and make it juicier in the end. That's bullshit. The juices just run off. So I don't agree with that at all. I haven't noticed the difference between the briskets I've done fat side up or fat side down, other than pretty much appearance. So you can't really baste a brisket. That doesn't work that way. And then lastly, you'll notice I put a water pan in the firebox. Dumb, especially one of those cheap aluminum pans. I always put my water pan in the cooking chamber right next to the firebox. I just find that it won't boil off like it did here. And also I think at some point in this video, that pan actually cracked open and might have extinguished my fire. I don't know if I even mentioned it in here, but I think that happened. So if you have a cowboy firebox, first of all, why? But second of all, don't put your water pan right in the firebox. Put it in the smoke chamber.
So the first thing I would say, I would definitely start the fire next time before I do anything with the meat. The fire took way longer to burn clean than I thought. I think next time I will definitely put the charcoal down and let a good bed of coals burn the fire dirty for a little bit just to get a nice coal bed going, and then I will start going at it. Another thing that's really going to be an issue today that I didn't think about because I'm a dumbass is my saw for my wood is supposed to be coming today. My hope was I could take pieces like this and cut them in half and be a little more manageable. I have a hacksaw, which I've been using to cut the wood, which isn't working out too well, as you can imagine.
Okay, Serta already mentioned it, getting a nice coal bed before you throw your food on. I struggled with that here because I didn't know what I was doing. But more importantly, your wood size. Like I said, I was impatient here. I didn't have the proper tools to get the size wood I need. Make sure you have the proper tools and make sure you know how your smoker is going to react by doing your practice burns before you do anything, please. But just know what you need, okay? Know what you need before you do something as stupid as making a brisket for the first time for your first cook, like I did. Yay.
Let's see if I can get these logs out. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, carefully.
Guys, don't screw with your smoker or your fire by taking out things and reinstalling things. Don't do that. What I was doing here was I was taking out the ash grate at the bottom of the smoker because the ash was falling through. I literally put out my fire at the most critical point of brisket cooking to get that nice smoke flavor. Oh my God, I'm so dumb. Don't do that. Don't screw with your smoker or try to reconstruct it while you're cooking a brisket, or anything for that matter. Let's continue.
Okay, let's see what we're working with here. It's about 3 hours. Ooh, that's looking nice. Got some fat rendering down. Crust is looking good. Bottom looks a little darker, but not too bad. Definitely darker toward the flat. Like I said, my hope is that the dirty smoke didn't fuck it up. Just gonna spritz it down to keep it moist. Once again, that's apple juice and water, 50-50 blend. I'm really hoping the dirty smoke didn't screw it, because I didn't have it for that long, maybe an hour. It wasn't that dirty, but you never know.
Okay, so the first thing I did here is I didn't look for the first 3 hours, which is good. You don't need to look at your brisket at all for the first 3 hours of cooking. You're cooking at lower temperatures, around 250. Don't look at it, don't open it up. It's not done yet, spoiler alert. I talked a lot about the dirty smoke here and how concerned I was about it. Yeah, I was concerned, and thinking back, if I remember correctly, it was very, very dirty. Mostly because I decided to screw with the firebox. That was cool. But if you have dirty smoke in the beginning of your cook, you don't want billowing white smoke, but I was so concerned about having clean smoke. You don't need pristine clean smoke. A little bit more dirty smoke, like, you know, just like puffs of white, not billowing white. Some nice blue smoke. That's gonna add delicious flavor to your brisket. You don't want that the whole cook, but the first 3 hours when you're really trying to add smoke flavor, that's great. But one thing here that I just cringed at was I literally said, I'm gonna spray my brisket. I don't know if I need to. This is something I saw from, I don't remember who, someone on YouTube probably, that, oh, you need to start spraying after 3 hours to prevent it from drying out. If you don't have to spray your brisket, don't spray your brisket, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is, don't spray the fat of your brisket. The fat's not gonna dry out. If you spray the fat, it's going to prevent a nice bark from forming. And you saw I had a wide mist there, and I was just going, yep, all right, cool, we're doing this. Don't do that. You only wanna spray parts that are drying out. Don't eat the knife. Oh my freaking God, Cat. Jameson's gonna join us. Lastly, you want, like I said, not a mist, but a nice straight stream of liquid, right? So you want to spray it in parts that are drying out. You want that straight stream to aim at those parts. You don't want it misting everywhere because you want to hit those specific parts. And by this time, your bark's not really setting yet, so you want to be extra careful. That's why you should start looking if you have to spray it 3 hours, but it's not required. Only spray if you really need to when your brisket's really drying out. And if it is really drying out, you probably have bigger problems when it comes to your fire or you're running temps too high or something like that. I'm almost out of whiskey. I think I need another glass. You gonna be good here? Yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, we're good. I just brought the handle with me just in case. Ah, so delicious. All right, let's keep going.
See that right there? That smoke. To be honest, that's probably the cleanest smoke I've had in the last 3 hours since we last talked. This has been a huge nightmare, but a learning experience. So we're at the 6 hour mark. It's 9 a.m. Like I said, a lot has happened. First thing, I don't regret taking that grate out. It's actually worked much better, in my personal opinion. However, getting to the point where it was working well was the complete nightmare. I've also learned that I need to wait before I decide to do things. These pieces I've been using, these are right on the edge, 16 inches, just about. They are not burning as evenly as I would hope. So that is causing a major issue. The grate, when I took that out, I put some logs on. It took a while. The smoker was running beautifully before that, and not saying that I screwed it up by taking that out. I screwed it up because I took it out when I did. So I had to open up the firebox because the smoke was dirty. We went down to about 180-ish in the cooker. It took me about 20 minutes to get the fire going again. I basically put the fire out. So once we got that going again, I used some small pieces. It worked pretty well. It was burning clean. It looked great. And then when I went to put more wood on, because we were once again maintaining temp around 250, I haven't been able to get it back up to 250 since. I went back down to like 180, 175. I've been hovering around 200 this entire time, and I'm getting extremely aggravated because the smoke has been probably 20% of the time clean. Otherwise, it hasn't been like billowing white disgustingness. It has not been what I would call good.
That just hit me because I I remember filming this part of this video and being so frustrated and so discouraged. I mean, we've all been there when doing something, right? So it is what it is. It's interesting to look back on. Okay, so takeaways. Don't try shit, right? Don't. I've already said that, but I'm gonna refresh your memory. Don't try shit when smoking something for the first time. Next, be patient, don't get discouraged. I was very discouraged here. It's gonna be fine. With practice, you'll get there in no time, trust me. The next thing I didn't do here is something I do nowadays, and that's from just practice, is I bump up the temps. Obviously, I was struggling with the fire, so I didn't have high temperatures. I was still in the low 200s, and they were very uneven. So the next 3 hours of the smoke after the initial check-in, so at the 6 hour mark, you're looking for bark formation. You're looking for some fat render. You're looking to see where you want to get that nice color and that nice bark that's forming. So running a little bit higher here, not an issue. And once again, uneven temperatures. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say you need to run it 260 exactly. You better not deviate from that, because then you're gonna ruin your brisket. I give or take 25 to 50 degrees most of the time. Keep in that range. You don't wanna be going from 180 to 300 to whatever I was doing here. It was off and on 100 degrees. A lot of factors went into that, which we'll talk about in a second, but something to keep in mind.
I also put in my thermometer probe, and we're at 154. When I first put it in 3 hours ago, we were hovering around 130-ish.
I don't know why I did that. The brisket's not done yet. I really shouldn't be caring about temperature. You really don't need to start caring about temperature until about, I would say, hour 7 on a small brisket, hour 8 on a larger one. Don't worry about temperature right off the bat, especially this early in the cook.
There's a look inside the box. I'm trying to burn that one down as much as I can. The bed of coals is working out a lot better, I think.
Yeah, so I saw somewhere on YouTube on a fire management video that you don't want to add more wood until you burn your wood to complete coals. That's not true, okay? For some smokers, yes, but going back to, you really need to know your smoker and do your test burns. For my Brazos, I add wood on way before my wood's burned down to coals, because I know that if I put wood on, it's going to bring the temps up to a certain point, and then I know when they drop to a certain point that I have to add wood. So learn your smoker. Don't listen to anyone that says, oh, you need to let it burn down or wait till this specific point when your wood looks like this. Learn your smoker first. Please learn your smoker. Know when to add your wood. It's gonna take practice, but once you know it, you'll be dialed in.
And why not ruin everything else and open this up? I mean, it's looking great, but it's just not cooking to the temperature I want it to. I want it to be at 250, and it's just not happening. So I don't know if I really need to spray it or not, but I'm going to.
I don't know what I meant by I want it to be at 250. I didn't mean the brisket. I think I meant the fire itself. That's what I'm assuming I meant. I don't know. Once again, didn't need to spray. And especially at this point, we should have had really, really good bark. Not like, completely perfect bark, but temperatures weren't there. Once again, didn't know my smoker. My fault.
All right, well, we're at 9 hours now, and we're still not done. Go figure. We are at 171 internal temperature, so we are probably just about at the hold, maybe surpassing it. I'm not sure. It was at 165 for 20 minutes, and I got the fire burning much hotter than it was before. I'm at fluctuating between 225 and 250 for the most part.
Okay, once again, I saw on YouTube somewhere that at 9 hours you should be at the stall. I said the hold at the time. I meant the stall. In my experience, I've had briskets stall out anywhere between 150 to 170. It really depends on the piece of meat. At about the 9 hour mark, I would say actually the 8 hour mark, like I said before, is when I place my probe just to see where we're at. If I notice that it's not really cooking, I know I've reached a stall and I know I need to bump my temperatures up. This is when you can cook the brisket pretty damn hot, 270, 280, even 290 I've bumped it up to. And with those higher temperatures, you're really looking at your fat render, getting a nice, dude, hi, how are you? Getting a nice bark, really setting that bark, getting it nice and crispy, and getting through the stall. So, can I help you?
Well, I was right on the money. I said 20 minutes to a half hour, and it has been a half hour, and we are at 180. We're at 180 in the point, and then we're at 192 in the flat. So we're ready to wrap. It's a 10-degree difference. It's not too bad. Let's take a look at this bad boy. It's not looking bad. There's not really a crust that I was looking for, unfortunately. Got some stuff, maybe the bottom. That's all the rendered fat up top. It's coming along nicely. As you can see, the juice is coming out there.
Okay, link to brisket part 3 right here. You can get more details about when to wrap your brisket. Now, first of all, I decided to wrap my brisket when? Based off temperature. That's one factor of 3 you really need to be looking at. You want it to be through the stall, at least in my case. However, you want to be looking at your bark. You want a nice even bark. You want to make sure that it's set and looks really good. You also want to make sure you have really, really good fat render. At this point, you sort of want your bark to be crispy because when you wrap, you're going to soften it. In this case, I didn't have fat render, even though I said I did. It was just from me spraying the fat constantly, so I didn't have a bark either. And if we look back, it's because of my low inconsistent temperatures. At this point, you really just want to be able to push your thumb into the top of the brisket, not all the way, but you want to push your thumb into the top of the brisket and it's going to give like butter. You want that nice yellow fat that just looks delicious. Then and only then do I recommend wrapping. Now, I don't know if I'm gonna ever wrap again, like I did in my last brisket video where I didn't wrap at all. I just like a crispier bark. If you don't like that, which some people don't, then yeah, wrap your brisket. Wrap it in butcher paper. Don't wrap it in foil. This will allow the brisket to breathe a little easier. So let's check out my wrap job here.
That's a juicy boy. Yeah, I just used my gloves here. It smells delicious, actually. Definitely a smoky smell to it, as you would expect. It's my first time doing this. No clue. Okay. I'm trying to wrap it as tight as I possibly can. All right. That's a terrible wrap, but whatever.
That was a terrible wrap. I mean, it was my first time, so can't give me too much shit. But yeah, that was pretty bad. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the paper. Now, if you noticed, I used 2 sheets width of paper, basically having it double underneath the brisket and then having a little bit on each side. I only use 1 sheet now because my brisket shrinks up enough where I'm just comfortable using 1 sheet. I don't double it up really anymore. Once again, that was something I saw in a YouTube video somewhere. You have to double it up. But one thing you can tell is that looked like me wrapping a Christmas gift. That's exactly how I wrap my Christmas presents if I wrap them at all. Not good at that, but I can wrap a brisket nowadays. But first off, I used way too much paper. How I measure out how much paper I'm gonna use now is I go about 4.5 turns, if you will, of the brisket. So I actually placed the brisket where I would have wrapped it once, okay? So just a little bit inside the end. I'll cover that in tallow, so the tallow is actually underneath the meat section. I'll take the paper, I'll wrap it over the top, which usually covers about 1/2 to 3/4 of the way. Flip it once so it's fat side down, obviously making it as tight as possible, which I didn't do here. I'll fold in the edges, make that look good. I'll flip it again, and now we're fat side up again. I'll take the extra paper, stuff it underneath, folded, so when I go to grab it, I have a nice area to grab it. I'm not sticking my hand in dirty paper or, tallow soaked paper. So that's gonna take some getting used to. Once again, I learned over time. So let's go on.
All right, I'm gonna put it down this way. Nope. Probably shouldn't have done that. It can stay like that. Put my probes in. All right, and now it's the easy part.
I mean, I'm not wrong saying this is the easy part, because literally now after you wrap it, you don't have to maintain a clean fire or anything. You just gotta maintain consistent temperatures. But the first thing I noticed here, which was sort of weird, is I didn't take out the top rack of my smoker. I wasn't using that for anything, so I don't know why I kept it in. I also could have slid out my rack too. If you have a sliding rack, don't know why I didn't do that. I don't actually know which way the brisket ended up, and I don't think I knew in this video when I was filming either, if it was fat side up or fat side down. I wanna put it on fat side up still. I don't change that because I want the tallow to be underneath. But typically what I do at this point is I'll turn the brisket and face the flat toward the fire. That will just tenderize it up a little bit more. Even if it is, in this case, it was really a higher temperature than the point, but it allows for it to just get a little more heat. And in some cases, like on the Patriot Pit smoker, the end of the smoker can be the hottest sometimes where all the heat collects. So it'll actually prevent the flat from overcooking. Even though that sounds sort of weird, Just trust me on it, it works. And you'll notice I put 2 probes in here, one in the point, one in the flat. Typically what I'll do now is just put it right in the middle of the point, right where the point meets the flat. It just gives me a good gauge because temperature isn't the only thing we're looking at. We'll get to that in a second.
Our nice hand saw that we got. Yeah, I didn't spend $300 on a saw because I don't care.
The dumbest thing I said in this video, probably. Just get yourself a saw and a splitter, okay? Or if you have an axe, obviously do it that way. I'm fat and lazy and diabetic, so I don't do that. Probably could help me get into shape. But I have a splitter for my small wood sizes. I get wood that's delivered split already. I have a miter saw. I did my fire management video, I showed you that. Just have a way to cut your wood. I've seen some people say they'll clamp it to something and use a chainsaw. That's fine too if you do that safely. I don't have anything to clamp wood to, so don't get a handsaw. It's not gonna be fun. I'll promise you that. I ended up returning that thing. Dumb. But once again, if you're gonna get into barbecue, have the proper tools to size your wood. Size matters when it comes to your wood. Don't forget it.
Okay, moment of truth. We were at 207 at the point and 210 at the flat. Time to take it off.
Okay, there's not much to see here other than when did I take it off? It was based off of temperature. I just saw in a YouTube video somewhere, somewhere in the 200s is a magic number, so take it off then, you're all set. Actually, these temperatures were a little bit higher than when I take my briskets off now. I really go by feel. When you pick up the brisket, does it bend right in the middle? Does it feel good? It's not firm for the most part. It sort of drapes over your hand, just like if you're cooking a rack of ribs or something like that. But also, I will stick my Thermapen in there and see if it feels like butter all the way around. Even if it doesn't, sometimes in the flat, it won't feel as tender. That's not really a big deal. My last brisket I did, I had a section of the flat that wasn't that tender. You just let it rest, it's going to be fine because it's going to continue cooking over the rest. As long as it feels tender, you're good to go.
I don't know what I'm doing! Yeah, you want to push that foil in for me? Don't stand in front of the camera though, I need them to see. Oh, that's hot. So hot. Well, that is the most half-ass fucking foil job I've ever seen. Next step, a towel. This is my towel, actually. I got the pink towel. It's my favorite color. And it's in a cooler for 2 hours. Moment of truth will soon come.
Okay, so much to talk about here. Like I said, I don't know what I'm doing here. If you're going to rest your brisket in a cooler, and if you're going to wrap it in foil, let it sit out for a little bit, okay? I would say even at least an hour. Reason being is you want that bark to breathe a little bit and actually dry out because you're gonna place it in the cooler wrapped in aluminum foil and it's gonna be soggy as hell when you take it out. Next, and this is a mistake I've done before, if you're gonna rest it in butcher paper, change the butcher paper if you wrap your brisket. I've had butcher paper stick because it was juicy and it sat resting for 14 hours. That really pissed me off because I worked so hard on that bark. Also the rest time. I let this rest for 2 hours in a cooler, wrapped in foil, in a towel. Like it was going to drop to 30 degrees. That doesn't happen. I could have probably just thrown it in the cooler and it would have been fine, unwrapped. Now I'm lucky enough where I purchased a house with warming trays before I even knew what barbecue was. So that's sort of cool. It worked out in my favor. But if you're resting in a cooler, let it breathe a little bit before you throw it in there. Then you can pack it with, you can wrap it in aluminum foil, you can pack it with towels, whatever. Should maintain temps for a while.
So do we just start having sex, or how's this work?
Yeah, that's how.
Rob,
If it's with the brisket, what the fuck is that?
Rob got cheese everywhere.
Yeah, my brisket cooking methods may have changed, but my friends have not. I still love them dearly, and they're still the same people. Okay, this thing is extremely tender. We just tried to take it out to put it on a pan and it didn't work out too well. So we're just gonna go for it. Cut it up, taste test it. We have all of our good friends here tonight. One thing to note, the bark is not very much there at all. This is the fat side, I believe. It's falling apart. Let's see what we can do with this. Okay, first off, going back to the cutting board. I just cut it in the butcher paper. Don't do that. Get a cutting board so you can see what you're doing and not put paper and foil in your brisket. Also, I said it was falling apart. That's not good, okay? So I definitely overcooked this brisket. I took it off at temperatures that were way too high. Then I let it rest in a cooler, covered in foil, covered in a towel for an extended period of time when it just continued to steam out and cook. Once again, said the bark wasn't good because it wasn't, because it was steamed out, because it was wrapped in foil and a towel. So don't do that.
3 hours later.
Yeah, no shit, right?
Oh, so
This is annoying as shit. I think I need the other knife. Want to hand me the red knife?
Yes, I leave burping in my videos. Still do that today. Okay, so let's talk about the knife for a second. Get yourself a nice slicing knife. This is the knife I've been using since I think right after I made this video. Once again, a nice Mercer knife. I actually am going to be getting a non-serrated knife, just a regular old slicing knife. The serrated's fine. However, I've noticed that it doesn't make as clean of cuts and it sometimes does pull the bark. So this is great for like bread and stuff, but for briskets, I feel like a non-serrated knife would do the trick. It'll keep everything intact much easier. Overall though, I will say my slicing wasn't terrible. I didn't have a lot of control because of my knife at the time. Getting the other knife wasn't the solution. That was my other chef's knife, so.
A little bit of fat there.
Don't let your friends pick the bark off that you worked so hard to make. In this case, I probably didn't care because it looked like shit. But don't have people pull apart your brisket before you've sliced it. Just a nice rule of thumb. Okay, and that was me slicing the point of the brisket. Now I slice right down the middle of the point. I sliced it correctly, you know, I was going the correct way, but I sliced right down the middle, and that way I start from the inside, work my way out, because at that point, when you get to the outside, you're gonna have the areas for burnt ends if you wanna either eat those or toss them some sauce, throw them back on the smoker, or throw them in the oven, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, it's not wrong. In this case, I didn't have burnt ends because the brisket was a soggy mess, but just something to keep in mind.
All right, so trying the, well, there's not a lot on it. Well, that's a little dry, I would say, but it's good peppery taste. It's not smoky. It's not smoky as enough.
On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the best.
As far as what comparison?
Tasting brisket.
Oh,
6.9. Oh, now I'm getting the after flavors.
Okay, like I said, it was dry, but it was also overcooked. I mean, it was just literally falling apart. I just didn't cook the brisket that well. You want to get to that sweet spot where the fat's rendered and it still holds under its own weight. I don't remember if I actually did the pull test or anything in this video, but for my first brisket, it had pretty good flavor. Didn't have the smoke flavor though, which is surprising because I was so concerned about a dirty fire the whole time.
Like I said, a little mustard or horseradish.
yeah.
It tastes like a brisket. It's good.
The fat, yeah, this fat didn't render down that well. I don't know. I'm not upset.
I was not upset at the end of the day. I mean, it was my first brisket. Could have went way worse than it did. That fat in the middle was pretty goddamn gross. Two factors with that. Once again, my uneven temps, not bumping the temps up high enough, and also not cutting that disgusting fat out in the beginning of the video where I said that's not gonna render down. That actually really has an effect on rendering that fat band, the decal, in the middle. And you can see I was picking it apart because I wasn't gonna pick up any pieces. It was so just mushy and overcooked. So that's basically my review of this first brisket cook video. That was very cringy. I'm surprised I only got through 2 glasses of whiskey. Cheers if you're drinking with me. But I hope that you guys learned something from this, and I actually really want you to send me videos or pictures of your first brisket cook. If you're watching this and you're like, okay, I have the encouragement I need, I can do this better than Josh. I empower you, and I really want you to do this better than I did. Please go out, go to my Instagram, send me pictures. I will reply to you, I swear to God, because I want to see how your first brisket turns out. And also, please shit on me in the comments because I'd love to hear from some of you guys that have been doing this a long time. I love all of you that give me ideas and talk to me. Once again, I'm no expert. I have a lot to learn still, but I really hope this helps some of you guys out there that are first getting into barbecue to know that we all start somewhere. It's a learning process, but at the end of the day, with practice, with patience, you're going to cook amazing barbecue right in your backyard without leaving your backyard. That being said, I'm so appreciative of you guys that stuck around until the end. Please smash that like button, get my content out to more people. I want to reach the barbecue community, and I want to spread my love of barbecue to the world and cooking in general, because I'm fat and I'm diabetic. Leave me a comment on things you want to see me make on the smoker, ideas you have, or if you want to just say what's up, because once again, I love hearing from you guys. Over here, I'm gonna put a video specifically designed for you. You're gonna love it, so check it out. And then over here, I'm slapping on my brisket, smoker brisket playlist. Yes, smoker beef, smoker, whatever, I don't remember what I called it. It's hours of entertainment, just enjoy it, okay? You'll learn a lot. Right in the middle, subscribe if you love this average face so much. And until next time, everyone, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay hungry.